Talk to my deaf son. Fred Morrison's voice boomed across Romano's upscale restaurant, his fury evident as champagne dripped from his expensive Italian suit. The 8-year-old boy in his arms trembled, tears streaming down his face while his small hands frantically gestured words nobody understood. "Sir, please," the manager stammered, but Fred's thunderous glare silenced him instantly. $300 for dinner and your staff can't handle a simple conversation with my kid? Fred's voice carried the dangerous edge that had built his criminal empire. What kind of establishment are you running here? Emma Williams, balancing a tray of appetizers, watched the scene unfold from across the dining room. The little boy's desperate signing tugged at something deep in her chest. She recognized every gesture he made. "Please help me. Daddy doesn't understand," the child was saying. "I'm scared everyone is staring." Without hesitation, Emma set down her tray and approached the volatile mobster everyone whispered about in hushed tones. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her hands already moving in fluid sign language toward the boy. "Hey there, sweetheart. What's your name?" The restaurant fell silent. Fred's amber eyes widened in shock as his son immediately stopped crying, his face lighting up with wonder. "You can understand me," the boy signed back eagerly. "My name is Tommy. Nobody ever talks to me like this. Before I continue with what happens next, I want you to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps me bring you more amazing stories like this one. And don't forget to give this video a like if you're already hooked." Emma smiled warmly at Tommy, then looked directly at Fred. "Your son was trying to tell you he spilled his drink because someone bumped into him. He's embarrassed and afraid you're angry with him." Fred's expression shifted from fury to bewilderment. This wasn't the first time Tommy's disability had caused public scenes, but no one had ever been able to bridge the communication gap so effortlessly. You speak sign language?" Fred's voice had lost its threatening edge, replaced by something Emma couldn't quite identify. Vulnerability, perhaps. "I do," Emma replied simply, kneeling to Tommy's eye level. "Tell your daddy you love him, and you're sorry about the mess." Tommy's small hands moved quickly, and though Fred didn't understand the gestures, he saw the love in his son's eyes. For a moment, the feared crime boss looked like nothing more than a confused father, desperate to connect with his child. "What did he say?" Fred asked quietly. "He said he loves you very much and he's sorry for causing trouble," Emma translated. "He also said he wishes you could learn his language so you could really talk to each other." Fred stared at this ordinary waitress who had just accomplished something he'd thought impossible. She was pretty in an understated way, auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, kind green eyes, maybe 28 years old. But there was something extraordinary about the way she'd connected with Tommy. "I'm Emma," she said, extending her hand. "And this little guy is absolutely delightful." "Fred Morrison," he replied, shaking her hand. His grip lingered longer than necessary, and Emma felt an unexpected jolt of electricity. Thank you. Tommy hasn't smiled like that in weeks." The other diners gradually returned to their conversations, but Fred remained frozen, watching Emma sign with his son. Tommy was animated now, telling her about school and his favorite video games, with the enthusiasm of a child who'd finally found someone who understood him. "How did you learn?" Fred asked. "My younger sister was born deaf," Emma explained. "Sign language was our family's first language growing up." She didn't mention that her sister had died in a car accident 2 years ago, or that signing with Tommy brought back bittersweet memories. "Would you—" Fred hesitated, then forged ahead. "Would you consider teaching me? I'll pay whatever you want." Emma looked between father and son, seeing the desperate need in both their faces. Tommy was signing excitedly now. "Daddy wants to learn my words. Can you teach him?" "I work here 6 nights a week," Emma said carefully, "but my mornings are usually free." Fred pulled out a business card, expensive black cardstock with gold lettering. "Call me tomorrow. We'll figure something out." As Emma took the card, their fingers brushed again, and this time the spark was unmistakable. Fred felt it too. She could see it in the way his breath caught, in the sudden intensity of his gaze. "Tomorrow," he repeated softly. "Don't make me wait too long, Emma. I'm not a patient man." Something in his tone sent shivers down her spine. As Fred carried Tommy toward the exit, the little boy waved goodbye over his father's shoulder, his face beaming with happiness. Emma stood there, card in hand, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. She couldn't know that Fred Morrison was one of Boston's most dangerous men, or that by tomorrow morning she'd be walking into a world where love and violence danced together in deadly harmony. All she knew was that when Fred looked at her, she felt something she hadn't felt since her sister died. Needed, seen, truly alive. The card in her pocket seemed to burn with possibility as she returned to her tables, Tommy's joyful signing replaying in her mind like a promise of something beautiful and terrifying to come. Yes. Emma stared at the black business card lying on her kitchen table, her morning coffee growing cold as sunlight streamed through her tiny apartment window. The elegant gold lettering simply read, Fred Morrison, followed by a phone number. No company name, no title, nothing to indicate what kind of man could afford $1,000 suits and dine at Romano's on a Tuesday night. Her laptop was open beside her, the cursor blinking in an empty Google search bar. Part of her wanted to research him, but another part, the part that had seen genuine desperation in a father's eyes, resisted the urge. Whatever Fred Morrison did for a living, his love for his son was real. At exactly 9 o'clock, Emma's phone rang. She recognized the number from the business card. "You called right on time," Emma said, surprised by her own boldness. Fred's low chuckle sent warmth through her chest. "I told you I wasn't patient. Did you sleep well?" The question was casual, but something in his tone suggested it mattered to him. "Not really," Emma admitted. "I kept thinking about Tommy." "Join the club," Fred said. "He signed Emma 50 times before bed. I counted." Emma's heart melted a little. "He's a special kid." "He is, and thanks to you, he's happier than I've seen him in months." Fred paused. "Listen, I know this is unconventional, but would you be willing to meet at my home? Tommy would be more comfortable there, and we could start his lessons immediately." Emma hesitated. Meeting a stranger at his house violated every safety rule she'd learned, but something about Fred made her want to trust him. "Where do you live?" "Beacon Hill." "I'll text you the address." His voice softened. "Emma, I know how this sounds. Beautiful woman, strange man, private meeting, but I give you my word, you'll be completely safe." 20 minutes later, Emma stood before a magnificent Victorian mansion overlooking Boston Common. The house screamed old money and power, making her suddenly conscious of her simple jeans and sweater. A uniformed man answered the door with a respectful nod. "Miss Williams, Mr. Morrison is expecting you." The interior was even more impressive. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, original artwork that probably cost more than Emma's annual salary. But despite its grandeur, the house felt warm, lived in. "Emma!" Tommy's excited voice echoed from the top of a curved staircase. The 8-year-old bounded down the steps, his face glowing with excitement. Fred appeared behind him, wearing casual khakis and a navy sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders. Dressed down, he was even more attractive than Emma remembered, dangerous and approachable at the same time. "Good morning," he said, his amber eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Good morning," Emma replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. Tommy immediately launched into animated signing. "I told Mrs. Patterson about you. She's my teacher and she knows some signs but not as many as you. Will you teach Daddy today?" "He's been practicing conversation topics all morning," Fred said with obvious pride. "What did he say?" Emma translated, watching Fred's face light up with paternal love. For the next 2 hours, she taught them basic signs. Hello, goodbye, I love you, hungry, tired, happy, sad. Fred was a surprisingly quick learner, his large hands graceful and precise as he formed each gesture. "Like this?" Fred asked, signing "I love you" to Tommy. Tommy's delighted giggle filled the room as he signed back. "I love you too, Daddy." Fred's eyes misted over. "Jesus," he whispered, "we just had our first real conversation." Emma felt tears in her own eyes. "This is just the beginning. With practice, you two will be chatting like old friends." "Stay for lunch," Fred said suddenly. "Please, I'll have my chef prepare something special." Emma glanced at her watch. "I should probably go. I work tonight and—" "Call in sick," Fred interrupted, then caught himself. "I'm sorry, that was presumptuous. It's just, Tommy's never this excited about learning, and frankly, neither am I." Emma looked at Tommy, who was signing "Please stay" with puppy dog eyes that were absolutely irresistible. "Okay," she said. "One lunch." Lunch turned into the afternoon. They practiced signs while eating, played sign language games, and Emma found herself laughing more than she had in months. Fred was charming when he wasn't intimidating, intelligent, funny, surprisingly gentle with his son. "How did Tommy lose his hearing?" Emma asked during a quiet moment, while Tommy played with toys in the corner. Fred's expression darkened. Car accident when he was 3, my wife was driving. He paused. She didn't survive. I'm so sorry, Emma said, instinctively reaching for his hand. 5 years ago, Fred said quietly. Tommy doesn't remember her voice, but he remembers her face. Sometimes I catch him looking at her pictures and signing things I can't understand. Emma squeezed his hand. He'll be able to tell you those thoughts now. You can learn about her through his eyes. Fred turned his hand to intertwine their fingers. You're amazing. You know that? Yesterday I was a man who couldn't talk to his own son. Today, thanks to you, everything's different. The intensity in his gaze made Emma's breath catch. She was acutely aware of their joined hands, of the way Fred was looking at her like she'd given him the moon. Fred, she began, but he shook his head. I know this is crazy. I know we just met, but I haven't felt this connected to anyone since Sarah died. You brought joy back into this house. Emma, you brought hope. Before Emma could respond, Tommy ran over and signed something that made Fred laugh. What did he say? Emma asked. Fred's cheeks actually reddened. He said you're pretty and asked if you're going to be his new mommy. Emma's heart skipped. What did you sign back? I told him we'd have to see what happens, Fred said, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. But privately, I'm hoping the answer is yes. The confession hung between them like a challenge. Emma stared into Fred's eyes and saw a man who was dangerous in ways she couldn't imagine, but who loved his son desperately and was looking at her like she held the key to their happiness. This is moving very fast, she whispered. The best things always do, Fred replied. The question is, are you brave enough to take the leap with us? Emma couldn't concentrate during her shift at Romano's. Every time she poured wine or took an order, her mind drifted back to Fred's house, to the warmth in his eyes when he'd asked if she was brave enough to take a leap with them. 3 days had passed since lunch at the Morrison mansion. 3 days of text messages from Fred updating her on Tommy's progress, photos of father and son practicing signs together, and increasingly personal conversations that kept Emma awake at night. You're distracted, observed Maria, the other waitress working the evening shift. Man trouble? Emma nearly dropped the tray she was carrying. What makes you say that? Honey, I've been married 23 years. I know the signs, Maria said with a knowing smile. Someone's got you twisted up inside. Anyone I know? Before Emma could answer, the restaurant's atmosphere shifted. The familiar hush fell over the dining room as Fred Morrison entered with his usual entourage of well-dressed men. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, Tommy wasn't with him, and Fred's expression was thunderous. Emma watched from across the room as the hostess seated Fred's party at their usual corner table. His eyes swept the restaurant until they found her, and she saw something that made her stomach clench. Worry, anger, and beneath it all, need. Their eyes locked across the crowded dining room, and Fred's slight nod toward the back exit told Emma he wanted to speak privately. Her pulse accelerated as she finished serving her current table. I need to take my break, Emma told Maria, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Emma slipped out the back door into the restaurant's small garden area, her heart pounding. Fred was already there, pacing like a caged animal. In the moonlight, she could see the tension in every line of his body. What's wrong? Emma asked immediately. Where's Tommy? He's safe. At home with bodyguards. Fred's voice was tight with controlled fury. Emma, I need to tell you something important about who I am, about what I do for a living. Emma's stomach dropped. She'd suspected Fred's wealth came from questionable sources, but she'd deliberately avoided thinking too hard about it. I already know you're not a traditional businessman, she said quietly. Fred's bitter laugh had no humor in it. That's a polite way to put it. Emma, I run the largest criminal organization in New England. Gambling, loan sharking, construction, shipping. If there's money in it and it operates in the shadows, it's probably connected to me. The words hung between them like a physical barrier. Emma felt the blood drain from her face as the full implications hit her. You're telling me this because my world just became dangerous for you, Fred said, stepping closer. Word got out that I've been spending time with someone new. There are people who would use you to get to me, to hurt Tommy. Emma's mind raced. Are you saying I'm in danger because I taught you sign language? I'm saying you're in danger because I'm falling in love with you, Fred said fiercely. And in my world, that makes you a target. The confession hit Emma like a physical blow. Love. After 3 days. Fred, this is insane, she whispered. We barely know each other. I know you give half your tips to the homeless man outside your apartment building. Fred said, moving closer still. I know you cry during sad movies and laugh at terrible jokes. I know you light up when you talk about your sister, and you get a tiny wrinkle between your eyebrows when you're concentrating on teaching Tommy a new sign. Emma stared at him. You've been watching me. I've been protecting you, Fred corrected. From the moment you walked into my life, I've had men keeping an eye on you, because I knew even that first night that you were going to matter, that you were going to change everything. This is too much, Emma said, backing away. I teach sign language, I serve tables, I live in a studio apartment and drive a car that's older than some of my co-workers. I don't belong in your world. My world doesn't deserve you, Fred agreed, but I'm selfish enough to want you anyway. His honesty was brutal and beautiful. Emma could see the war in his eyes, the dangerous man who took what he wanted, battling against the father who would sacrifice anything for love. What are you asking me to do? Emma whispered. Come home with me tonight. Let me keep you safe while we figure this out. Fred's voice dropped to an intimate murmur. Let me show you that despite everything I am, everything I've done, what I feel for you is real. Emma thought about her quiet, safe life, her simple apartment, her predictable routines, the careful boundaries she'd built around her heart since losing her sister. Then she thought about Tommy's joyful face when he signed with his father, about the vulnerability in Fred's eyes when he'd admitted he couldn't communicate with his own son, about the electricity she felt every time their hands touched. If I say yes, she said slowly, what happens to my life, my job, my independence? Whatever you want to happen, Fred said. I'm not asking you to disappear, Emma. I'm asking you to trust me with your safety long enough for us to explore what this is between us. A gunshot echoed from the street, sharp and violent in the night air. Fred immediately stepped in front of Emma, his entire body coiled for action. Get down, he commanded, pulling out a phone. Marco, we have a problem. Romeo's back garden. Now. Emma crouched behind a decorative planter, her mind struggling to process what was happening. This wasn't a movie. This was real danger, real violence, real fear. Within seconds, 3 black SUVs pulled into the alley. Men in dark suits emerged with military precision, surrounding the garden area. All clear, boss, one of them called. False alarm. Backfire from a motorcycle on the main street. Fred holstered whatever he'd pulled from his jacket and helped Emma to her feet. Her legs were shaking. This, he said grimly, is why I needed to tell you the truth. This is the reality of being close to me. Emma stared at the armed men, at Fred's easy command of dangerous situations, at the stark reminder that she was falling for a man who lived on the edge of violence. Take me home, she said quietly. To your home tonight. Fred's eyes widened. Emma, are you sure? There's no going back once you cross this line. Emma thought about her sister, who died before experiencing real love, about opportunities missed and risks not taken, about the way Tommy's face lit up when his father signed to him. I'm sure, she said. I'm terrified, but I'm sure. Just promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll teach me how to protect myself in your world. If I'm going to be part of this, I won't be helpless. Fred's smile was proud and fierce. Deal. But first, let me show you what it means to be treasured by a man who would burn down the world to keep you safe. As they walked toward his waiting car, Emma realized she was about to discover what it felt like to love a dangerous man. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel more alive than she had in years. Emma's first night in Fred Morrison's mansion changed everything. She woke in a guest bedroom larger than her entire apartment, silk sheets soft against her skin, sunlight filtering through expensive curtains. For a moment she wondered if the previous evening had been an elaborate dream. Then she heard laughter from downstairs, Tommy's delighted giggles mixed with Fred's deeper chuckle, and reality crashed back. She was living with one of Boston's most dangerous criminals, and somehow she'd never felt safer. Good morning, beautiful, Fred said as Emma entered the kitchen. He was standing at the stove making pancakes while Tommy sat at the counter, signing animated stories about his dreams. Emma's breath caught. Fred in a business suit was intimidating. Fred in jeans and a t-shirt, flour dusting his hands while he cooked for his son, was devastatingly attractive. Sleep okay? Fred asked, his eyes warm with concern. Like a baby, Emma replied, which was only partially true. She'd lain awake for hours thinking about gunshots and bodyguards, and the way Fred had looked at her like she was precious beyond measure. Tommy noticed her and immediately began signing. Emma, Daddy made pancakes shaped like letters. He spelled your name. Emma looked at the plate Fred was preparing and saw pancake letters EMMA arranged with strawberries and whipped cream. Her heart melted. "Show off," she said to Fred, accepting the plate with a smile. "I have many talents," Fred replied, his voice carrying undertones that made Emma blush. Over breakfast, Emma learned more about their daily routine. Tommy attended a special school for deaf children 3 days a week and had home tutoring the other days. Fred's business meetings were usually conducted from his home office, though he occasionally had to travel. "What exactly do you tell people I am?" Emma asked as they watched Tommy play in the garden through the kitchen window. "My son's sign language tutor," Fred said simply, which is technically true. "And personally?" Fred set down his coffee and moved closer to her, his proximity making her pulse quicken. "Personally, you're the woman who's turning my world upside down in the best possible way." Before Emma could respond, a tall, elegant woman entered the kitchen. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair swept into a perfect chignon and clothes that screamed expensive taste. "Frederick, darling, I hope I'm not interrupting," the woman said, her gaze settling curiously on Emma. Fred immediately tensed. "Mother, you're early." Emma's stomach dropped. This was Fred's mother, and Emma was clearly not what the older woman had expected to find in her son's kitchen. "Mrs. Morrison," Emma said, standing and extending her hand. "I'm Emma Williams, the sign language teacher," Mrs. Morrison said, her handshake firm and assessing. "I've heard so much about you from Tommy." "All good things, I hope," Emma managed. Mrs. Morrison's smile was polite but reserved. "Tommy adores you. He's been signing constantly about the lady who talks with her hands and makes Daddy smile." Fred shot his mother a warning look, but she ignored him. "Perhaps we could speak privately, Frederick," Mrs. Morrison suggested. "Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of Emma," Fred replied firmly. "Very well." Mrs. Morrison turned to Emma. "My dear, I'm sure you're lovely, but surely you understand that this situation is complicated?" Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm not sure I follow. My son's position in the community requires certain considerations, social expectations. The women he chooses to associate with reflect on all of us." "Mother," Fred's voice carried a dangerous edge. "I'm just saying that perhaps Miss Williams would be more comfortable returning to her regular employment while we find Tommy a more suitable tutor." Emma felt like she'd been slapped. The message was clear. She wasn't good enough for this family, this world, this life. "You're absolutely right," Emma said quietly, setting down her napkin. "I should go." "Like hell you should," Fred said fiercely, moving to stand beside Emma. "Mother, you're out of line." "I'm being practical, Frederick. This woman," Fred corrected sharply, "is the first person to make Tommy laugh since Sarah died. She's the reason my son and I can finally communicate, and she's the woman I'm falling in love with." Mrs. Morrison's eyes widened. "Love? Frederick, you've known her less than a week." "I've known her long enough," Fred said, taking Emma's hand. "Long enough to know she's kind, intelligent, brave, and exactly what Tommy and I need." Emma stared at their joined hands, her heart racing. Fred was choosing her over his mother's approval, over social expectations, over whatever consequences might come from defying his family's wishes. "Emma," Fred said, turning to face her fully, "I'm sorry about this. My mother means well, but she's wrong. You belong here, with us." Mrs. Morrison made a small sound of distress. "Frederick, please think about what you're doing, your position, your responsibilities." "My responsibility is to my son and my own happiness," Fred interrupted, "and both of those include Emma." Through the window they could see Tommy playing, blissfully unaware of the adult drama unfolding. Emma thought about his bright smile when he signed, about the way Fred's face lit up when he successfully communicated with his son. "I need some air," Emma said, gently extracting her hand from Fred's. "I'll be in the garden." She walked outside, her mind spinning. Mrs. Morrison was right about one thing. Emma didn't belong in this world. She was a waitress from Dorchester, who lived paycheck to paycheck. Fred was wealthy, powerful, dangerous in ways she was only beginning to understand. But then Tommy noticed her and ran over, signing excitedly. "Emma, watch this! I can sign the alphabet really fast now." As Emma watched Tommy's enthusiastic display, she realized something important. It didn't matter what Mrs. Morrison thought or what society expected or what made logical sense. What mattered was this little boy, who'd found his voice because of her, and the man who'd found hope because of them both. When Fred joined her in the garden minutes later, his expression was apologetic and determined. "My mother's gone," he said. "I made it very clear that you're not going anywhere." "What if she's right?" Emma asked. "What if this is too complicated, too impossible?" Fred cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "Emma, I've built an empire on taking impossible risks. I've survived in a world where the wrong decision gets you killed, and I'm telling you that loving you is the smartest, safest bet I've ever made." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Emma saw her future reflected in his amber eyes. Complicated, dangerous, beautiful, and absolutely worth fighting for. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's see where this impossible thing takes us." Tommy's delighted applause made them both laugh. He'd been watching them and was now signing, "Daddy and Emma are going to get married." "What's he saying?" Fred asked. Emma blushed furiously. "He thinks we're getting married." Fred's smile was slow and predatory. "Smart kid. Maybe I should start teaching him about predictions coming true." 2 weeks into living at the Morrison mansion, Emma was beginning to understand the intricate dance of Fred's dangerous world. Bodyguards rotated shifts with military precision. Phone calls were conducted in coded language. Meetings happened in the soundproof office, where Emma was never allowed. But she was also learning about Fred the man, how he read Tommy 3 bedtime stories every night, how he made Saturday morning pancakes shaped like different animals, how he held Emma's hand while they watched old movies, his thumb tracing circles on her skin like a promise. "You're distracted," Fred observed during one of their evening sign language lessons. Tommy was upstairs doing homework, and they were practicing advanced conversation techniques. "Sorry," Emma said, shaking her head to clear her thoughts. "I was thinking about your meeting this afternoon." Fred's expression darkened. "What about it?" Emma had overheard enough to know that someone named Vittorio was challenging Fred's territory, that tensions were escalating, that Fred's lieutenants were pushing for violent retaliation. "You were angry when you came home," Emma said carefully. "Your signing was more aggressive than usual." Fred set down his coffee and studied her. "You're getting too good at reading me. Is that a bad thing?" "In my world, probably." Fred moved closer to her on the couch. "Emma, there are things happening that might require me to be away from home more often. I need to know you'll be safe here with Tommy." A chill ran through Emma's chest. "How away? And how dangerous?" Fred's hesitation told her everything. "Dangerous enough that I'm considering sending you both to my house in Martha's Vineyard until things settle down." "No," Emma said firmly. "We're not running away. Tommy needs stability, routine, his school friends, and I'm not leaving you to face whatever this is alone." "Emma, this isn't a negotiation." "You're right," Emma interrupted, standing up. "It's not, because I'm an adult who gets to make her own choices, and I choose to stay." Fred rose as well, his amber eyes flashing with frustration and something that looked like fear. "You don't understand what you're asking for." "Then explain it to me," Emma challenged. "Stop protecting me from information I need to make smart decisions." For a long moment, Fred just stared at her. Then slowly he sat back down and patted the couch beside him. "Vittorio Castellano," he began, "is trying to muscle in on my shipping operations. It's worth about $50 million a year in revenue. He's been putting pressure on my dock workers, intimidating my clients, making moves that can't be ignored." Emma listened quietly, her heart racing as Fred described a world of territorial disputes and violent solutions. "My advisors want me to hit back hard. Send a message that will end this quickly." Fred's voice was grim. "But any action I take will result in retaliation. Things could get ugly fast." "What does ugly look like?" Emma asked. "Car bombings, targeted assassinations, innocent people getting caught in crossfire?" Fred took her hand. "The kind of ugly that could touch you and Tommy if you're too close to me." Emma absorbed this information, understanding for the first time the full scope of what loving Fred Morrison meant. It wasn't just dangerous, it was potentially deadly. "What do you want to do?" she asked quietly. Fred's smile was bitter. "What I want to do and what I need to do are different things. I want to find a peaceful solution, negotiate territory, avoid bloodshed. But my reputation depends on strength. Show weakness in this business and you're dead within a month." Emma saw the impossible position Fred was in, caught between protecting his family and maintaining the power that kept them safe in the first place. "What if there was a third option?" Emma suggested. Something that shows strength but isn't pure violence? Like what? Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking. What does Vittorio want most? The shipping business. The money from the shipping business, Fred corrected. What if you offered him a different revenue stream? Something equally profitable but in different territory? Fred raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting I give him a gift? I'm suggesting you negotiate from a position of power. Show him that you're strong enough to be generous, smart enough to find solutions that work for everyone. Fred stared at her in amazement. Emma, that's actually not a terrible idea. Don't sound so surprised, Emma said with a smile. I do have a brain. A beautiful brain, Fred agreed, pulling her closer, along with everything else beautiful about you. Before Emma could respond, the sound of gunshots erupted from outside. Real ones this time, multiple shots in rapid succession. Fred immediately pushed Emma to the floor behind the couch. Stay down, he commanded, pulling out his phone. Marco, report. Emma could hear muffled conversation, Fred's terse questions, and her own heart pounding loud enough to drown out everything else. Tommy? She gasped, realizing the shots had come from the direction of the main house. He's safe, Fred assured her without looking up from his phone. Panic room. Automatic lockdown when sensors detect gunfire. More shots rang out, closer this time. Fred spoke rapidly into his phone, coordinating response with his security team. Emma had never seen him in full command mode before. The transformation from loving father to dangerous leader was complete and terrifying. All clear, Fred finally announced, helping Emma to her feet. Vittorio sent a message. No one was hurt, but they shot up the front gate and left a calling card. Emma's legs were shaking. What kind of calling card? Fred's expression was granite hard. A photo of Tommy leaving school yesterday. The threat was unmistakable. Emma felt sick to her stomach as the full implications hit her. These people knew where Tommy went to school. They'd been watching him, photographing him, planning. That's it, Fred said, his voice deadly calm. I'm done playing nice. Emma, pack a bag for you and Tommy. You're leaving for the vineyard tonight. No, Emma said again, but with less conviction this time. This isn't a request, Fred said sharply. They threatened my son. That crosses every line I have. Emma saw the war in Fred's eyes. Love for his family battling against the violent instincts that had kept him alive in a dangerous world. She realized that her presence had tipped the balance toward violence, that by staying she was forcing Fred to choose between protecting them and maintaining the careful equilibrium that kept his world stable. What if I have a better idea? Emma said quietly. Fred paused. I'm listening. What if we use this threat as an opportunity? Show Vittorio that messing with your family was the worst mistake he could make, but do it in a way that demonstrates your power rather than just your willingness to kill. Fred's smile was dangerous and proud. Emma Williams, you might just be the smartest woman I've ever met. As sirens wailed in the distance and Fred's security team secured the perimeter, Emma realized she was no longer just learning about Fred's world. She was becoming part of it, helping shape it, making it her own. The transformation was as thrilling as it was terrifying. Emma's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of retaliating with violence, Fred would demonstrate his reach and intelligence by exposing Vittorio's operation to federal authorities, while simultaneously offering him a face-saving exit from Boston. Do you want me to gift-wrap my enemy for the FBI? Fred asked as they sat in his office planning the strategy. I want you to show him that you're so powerful you don't need to kill him, Emma explained. That you can destroy him with a phone call if you choose, but you're offering mercy instead. Fred leaned back in his leather chair, studying Emma with newfound respect. And if he doesn't take the hint, then you'll have demonstrated reasonable restraint when you do what you have to do. 3 days later, Fred's plan was in motion. His contacts in law enforcement received detailed intelligence about Vittorio's drug distribution network. His business associates received subtle warnings about Vittorio's unreliability. His financial backers received evidence of Vittorio's skimming. Within 48 hours, Vittorio Castellano's entire operation was crumbling. He's asking for a meeting, Fred announced, hanging up his phone. Wants to negotiate terms. Emma felt a surge of satisfaction. He's scared. He's smart enough to be scared, Fred corrected, which means this might actually work. The meeting took place at a neutral location, a private dining room at an upscale restaurant downtown. Fred insisted Emma stay home with Tommy, but she convinced him she should be there as his advisor. If this goes wrong, Fred warned as they entered the restaurant, you stay behind me and do exactly what I say. Emma nodded, her stomach tight with nerves. She'd never been present for anything like this, an actual confrontation between two powerful criminal organizations. Vittorio Castellano was not what Emma had expected. He was in his 50s, well-dressed but not ostentatious, with intelligent eyes and calloused hands that suggested he'd worked his way up from street level. "Morrison," he said as they sat down, "and this must be the famous sign language teacher." Emma felt Fred tense beside her. "My business advisor," Fred corrected smoothly. Vittorio's laugh was genuinely amused. "I like her already. Takes balls to sit at this table." For the next hour, Emma watched a master class in negotiation. Fred was calm, reasonable, and absolutely terrifying in his quiet confidence. He laid out exactly how he dismantled Vittorio's operation, demonstrated his superior intelligence network, and made it clear that violence would be both unnecessary and one-sided. "So what are you proposing?" Vittorio asked finally. "Atlantic City," Fred said simply. "I have contacts there who could use experienced management for their casino operations. Legitimate money, good profit margins, completely different territory from my interests here." Vittorio studied Fred for a long moment. "And if I say no?" Fred's smile was arctic. "Then tomorrow my associates will explain to your remaining allies exactly how easily I found their private financial information. The day after that, they'll receive detailed files on their family's daily routines." The threat was clear without being explicit. Vittorio's eyes narrowed, but Emma could see him calculating odds and finding them unfavorable. "You've made your point," Vittorio said finally. "Atlantic City could be interesting." Emma felt Fred's hand find hers under the table, a warm squeeze that conveyed both relief and pride. "Excellent," Fred said. "I'll make the introductions." As they prepared to leave, Vittorio turned to Emma. "Impressive strategy, young lady. Morrison's lucky to have someone who understands that the smartest victories are the ones that don't require body bags." Emma felt a flush of pride mixed with unease. She'd just helped orchestrate the peaceful resolution of a territorial war, but she'd also crossed another line into Fred's world, the line between observer and participant. That evening, Fred celebrated by cooking dinner for Emma and Tommy himself. They practiced sign language over pasta and wine, Tommy delighting in telling jokes in sign, while his father laughed and Emma translated. "You did something extraordinary today," Fred told Emma as they cleaned up the kitchen. "Most people in my position would have chosen violence. You found a better way." "We found a better way," Emma corrected. "I just suggested it." "You made it happen." Fred set down the dish he'd been drying and turned to face her fully. "Emma, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his tone made Emma's pulse quicken. "What?" "I've never had a partner before. Sarah was the mother of my child, but she never wanted to know about my business. My mother thinks my work is a necessary evil. But you—" Fred moved closer. "You see all of me, the father, the criminal, the man trying to balance impossible choices, and you help me be better than I thought possible." Emma's breath caught. "Fred, I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "Not just attracted, not just grateful. Deeply, completely in love with who you are and how you fit into my life." Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "Both of you. This whole complicated, dangerous, beautiful life we're building together." When Fred kissed her, Emma tasted promise and possibility. She thought about the scared waitress she'd been 2 weeks ago and the woman she was becoming, strong enough to sit at negotiating tables, smart enough to find peaceful solutions, brave enough to love a dangerous man. Tommy's excited applause broke them apart. He'd been watching from the doorway and was now signing rapidly. "Are you getting married now? Can I be in the wedding? Will Emma be my real mommy?" Fred and Emma looked at each other and burst into laughter. "What did he say?" Fred asked. "He wants to know when the wedding is," Emma said, blushing. Fred's smile was soft and dangerous and full of love. "Tell him soon," he said. "Tell him very, very soon." As Emma translated and Tommy cheered, she realized that somewhere between teaching sign language and preventing war, she'd found her forever family. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was exactly the life she wanted, even if it came with bodyguards and the occasional gunfire. Resundösa. 3 months later, Emma had settled into the rhythm of her new life with surprising ease. She'd quit her job at Romano's, though Fred had offered to buy the restaurant, just so she could keep working there if she wanted. Instead, she'd enrolled in graduate classes in deaf education, pursuing a master's degree that Fred insisted on paying for. "It's an investment in Tommy's future," he'd argued when she protested. The better qualified his teacher is, the better his education will be. Emma had learned to navigate the complexities of loving a man whose phone calls were monitored by federal agencies, whose business meetings required armed security, whose enemies occasionally sent threatening messages. But she'd also learned about the Fred that only she and Tommy saw, the man who sang off-key in the shower, who cried during sappy commercials, who panicked when Tommy ran a fever. Their sign language lessons had evolved into family conversations. Tommy could now tell elaborate stories about his day, share his dreams and fears, argue about bedtime and vegetables like any 8-year-old. The transformation in both father and son was remarkable. "Emma," Tommy signed one evening as they sat in the garden. "Are you going to marry Daddy?" Emma glanced toward the house where Fred was on a business call. "Why do you ask?" "Because you love each other, and because I want you to be my real mommy, not just my sign teacher." Emma's heart squeezed. Tommy had never spoken directly about missing his mother, but his need for maternal love was obvious in how he sought out Emma's attention, her approval, her comfort when he was hurt or scared. "Would you like that?" Emma asked. "If your daddy and I got married?" Tommy's face lit up with pure joy. "Yes! We could have a real family again." That night, as Emma tucked Tommy into bed, he signed something that made her catch her breath. "I love you, Mommy." Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too, sweetheart." She found Fred in his study, going over financial reports with the grim expression he wore when dealing with legitimate business challenges. Apparently, even criminal enterprises had to worry about tax compliance and quarterly projections. "Everything okay?" Emma asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Just the usual headaches," Fred said, closing the laptop. "How was your evening with Tommy?" "Illuminating," Emma said. "He asked if we were getting married." Fred's attention sharpened immediately. "What did you tell him?" "I asked what he wanted," Emma said carefully. "He said he wants us to be a real family." Fred was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the desk in the way they did when he was thinking through complicated problems. "Emma," he said finally, "there's something we need to discuss. Something I should have told you weeks ago." A chill ran through Emma's chest. "What?" Fred stood and moved to the window overlooking the garden where they'd shared so many quiet moments. "The FBI has been investigating my operations for 18 months. They're building a RICO case." Emma felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "RICO? Racketeering charges. If they have enough evidence, they could arrest me, seize all my assets, destroy everything I've built?" Fred's voice was matter-of-fact, but Emma could see the tension in his shoulders. "The lawyer thinks they're 6 months away from indictments." Emma stared at him, her mind racing through implications. "What does that mean? For us, for Tommy?" "It means that marrying me could make you an accessory to federal crimes. It means that loving me could cost you your freedom." Fred turned to face her, his expression tortured. "It means I have to give you the chance to walk away before it's too late." Emma felt like she'd been punched in the chest. "You're ending this." "I'm giving you a choice," Fred said firmly. "A real choice with all the information you need to make it." Emma thought about everything she'd learned about Fred's world. The violence, the complexity, the constant threat of law enforcement. She thought about her simple life before him, her safe apartment, her predictable routine. Then she thought about Tommy's face when he signed, "I love you, Mommy," about Fred's gentle hands teaching her to shoot a gun for protection, about the family they'd built from broken pieces. "What happens to Tommy if you're arrested?" she asked. "My mother would get custody. She's his legal guardian in case something happens to me." Fred's voice cracked slightly. He'd be safe, well provided for, but he'd lose everything stable in his life all over again. Emma stood and walked to Fred, taking his hands in hers. "And you'd lose everything too." "I'd lose you," Fred said simply. "That's all that matters." Emma looked into his amber eyes and saw a man prepared to sacrifice his own happiness for her safety. It was the most selfless and heartbreaking thing she'd ever witnessed. "Fred," she said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Anything. If the FBI arrests you, would you cooperate? Would you consider testifying against other families in exchange for a reduced sentence?" Fred's expression hardened. "Emma, that's not how this world works. People who cooperate with federal authorities don't live long enough to enjoy reduced sentences. But if it meant coming home to Tommy and me sooner, it would mean never coming home at all," Fred said firmly. "Emma, I understand what you're asking, but there are lines even I won't cross." Emma nodded, understanding both the loyalty that defined Fred's character and the impossible position it put them all in. In that case, she said, I have a different idea. Fred raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Marry me, Emma said simply. Tonight, tomorrow, as soon as we can arrange it. Fred stared at her in shock. Emma, you haven't been listening. Marrying me would make me your legal partner, Emma interrupted. Would give me rights regarding Tommy's care. Would mean that whatever happens, we face it as a family, instead of as individuals making impossible choices. Fred's hands tightened on hers. You could go to prison. I could also spend the rest of my life regretting not fighting for the best thing that's ever happened to me, Emma replied. Fred, I'm not some naive girl who doesn't understand consequences. I'm a woman who's found her home, her purpose, her heart. And I'm not giving that up because the future is uncertain. Fred searched her face for signs of doubt, of fear, of second thoughts. Instead, he found determination and love so fierce it took his breath away. Emma Williams, he said softly, will you marry me, knowing it might be the most dangerous decision you've ever made? Frederick Morrison, Emma replied. I can't think of anything I'd rather do. When Fred kissed her, Emma tasted their entire future, uncertain, complicated, probably difficult, but absolutely worth fighting for. In the morning, they would start planning a wedding. Tonight, they would hold each other and dream of forever. Emma's wedding dress was simple, an elegant cream silk sheath that Tommy had helped her pick out during a secret shopping trip. The ceremony took place in Fred's garden on a crisp October morning, with only family and Fred's closest associates in attendance. Tommy served as ring-bearer and translator for the deaf priest Fred had found to perform the service in both spoken English and American Sign Language. Do you, Frederick Morrison, take Emma Williams to be your wife in sickness and in health, in freedom and in captivity, till death do you part? The priest asked, his hands moving gracefully as he signed each word. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes at the modified vows. Fred had insisted on acknowledging the unique challenges their marriage might face. I do, Fred said, both speaking and signing simultaneously. The sight of her husband-to-be using the language they'd learned together made Emma's heart swell with joy. Do you, Emma Williams, take Frederick Morrison to be your husband, knowing the risks, accepting the challenges, choosing love over safety? Emma looked at Fred, dangerous, beautiful, devoted Fred, who'd given her a family and a purpose, and felt absolutely no doubt. I do, she said, her voice clear and strong. Tommy's excited applause made everyone smile as Fred slipped a stunning platinum band onto Emma's finger. The kiss they shared sealed not just their marriage, but their commitment to face whatever came next together. Ladies and gentlemen, the priest announced, I present Mr. and Mrs. Morrison. The reception was held in the mansion's ballroom, with carefully vetted guests who understood the need for discretion. Emma danced with her new husband, while Tommy signed the lyrics to the songs, his face glowing with happiness. No regrets? Fred asked as they swayed to a slow jazz standard. Only that we didn't do this sooner, Emma replied, her hand resting against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat. Mrs. Morrison, Fred murmured, I like the sound of that. Their honeymoon was brief, a long weekend at the Martha's Vineyard house, but perfect. Emma woke each morning to ocean views and her husband's gentle kisses, fell asleep each night in arms that made her feel completely safe, despite the danger swirling around their lives. On their last night, as they sat on the beach watching the sunset, Fred received a call that changed everything. We need to go home, he said after hanging up. My lawyer wants to meet with us tomorrow morning. The meeting was held in Fred's study, with federal attorney Robert Chen explaining the government's case in stark terms. They have financial records going back 5 years, Chen said, reviewing documents spread across the conference table. Wiretapped conversations. Testimony from 2 informants. Fred, they have enough to convict you on multiple RICO counts. Emma felt Fred's hand tighten in hers under the table. What are we looking at for sentencing? Fred asked. 25 to 30 years minimum, Chen replied grimly. And Emma, as his wife, you could be charged as a co-conspirator if they can prove knowledge of criminal activity. Emma's stomach clenched. What kind of proof would they need? Participation in meetings, access to financial records, evidence that you knew about illegal operations and benefited from them. Chen looked at Emma sympathetically. They might offer you immunity in exchange for testimony against Fred. That's not going to happen, Emma said immediately. Chen nodded. I thought you'd say that, which means we need to prepare for both of you to be arrested within the next month. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Emma thought about Tommy, about the family they'd just created, about the life they'd barely begun to build. "What about Tommy?" Fred asked, voicing her thoughts. "Your mother has already been contacted about custody arrangements," Chen said. "The good news is that your legitimate assets are in a trust that can't be seized. Tommy will be financially secure, but he'll lose both his parents," Emma said quietly. "Not necessarily," Chen replied. "There might be another option." Fred leaned forward. "We're listening. The government is most interested in the heads of the 5 major crime families operating in New England. You're significant, Fred, but you're not their primary target." Chen paused. "If you were willing to provide information about the commission meetings, about the territorial agreements, about the coordination between families—" "No," Fred said immediately. "Absolutely not." "Fred, listen to the offer," Chen continued. "Full immunity for Emma, witness protection for all 3 of you. Tommy could grow up with both his parents." Emma felt her heart race with hope and terror. Witness protection meant disappearing forever, leaving behind everything they knew, but it also meant staying together. "What would it involve?" Emma asked, ignoring Fred's sharp look. "Extensive debriefing, testimony in multiple trials, relocation to a city where you'd never be found, new identities, new lives, complete separation from your current world." Fred stood abruptly and walked to the window. "Emma, you don't understand what you're asking. The families I'd be testifying against don't forget. They don't forgive. Even in witness protection, we'd spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, as opposed to spending the rest of our lives in prison," Emma challenged. "I'd rather die in prison with my honor intact than live free as a rat," Fred said harshly. Emma felt something break inside her chest. "What about Tommy? What about us? Doesn't your family matter more than your reputation?" Fred turned to face her, his expression tortured. "My family matters more than anything. That's why I won't put you in danger by crossing lines that can never be uncrossed." "Mr. Chen," Emma said quietly, "if Fred refused to cooperate, but I provided information about activities I witnessed, would that be enough to secure immunity for myself and custody of Tommy?" The room fell silent. Fred stared at Emma in shock and betrayal. "Emma, you can't be serious," Fred said. "I'm serious about protecting our son," Emma replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "And I'm serious about not spending his childhood in federal prison because you're too proud to make hard choices." "If Emma provided substantial cooperation," Chen said carefully, "the government might consider reduced charges for Fred as well, perhaps 8 to 10 years instead of 25. Emma saw the war in Fred's eyes, love for his family battling against the code of loyalty that had defined his entire life. "I need time to think," Fred said finally. "You have 48 hours, Chen replied. "After that, the indictments will be sealed and the offer comes off the table." As Chen gathered his papers and left, Emma and Fred sat in heavy silence. The weight of their impossible choice pressed down on them like a physical force. "You'd really do it?" Fred asked finally. "You'd testify against me to save yourself?" Emma moved to kneel beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. "I'd testify for you, not against you. I'd help you find a way to come home to Tommy and me in 8 years instead of never." Fred's eyes filled with tears. "Emma, you don't know what you're asking for. The guilt, the fear, the knowledge that good people might die because of what we said." "I know that Tommy needs his father," Emma replied firmly. "I know that I need my husband. And I know that sometimes the most honorable thing you can do is sacrifice your pride for love." Fred pulled Emma into his lap, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. 48 hours, he whispered against her hair. 48 hours, Emma agreed. Neither of them slept that night. The decision came at dawn on the second day, as Emma and Fred sat in their garden watching Tommy play on his swing set. The little boy was signing a conversation with his stuffed animals, blissfully unaware that his parents were deciding the trajectory of all their lives. "I'll do it," Fred said quietly. "I'll cooperate." Emma felt relief and heartbreak crash through her simultaneously. Relief that they would stay together. Heartbreak at the cost Fred was paying for that choice. "Are you sure?" she asked. Fred's laugh was bitter. "I'm sure that I love you and Tommy more than I love my reputation. I'm sure that 8 years is better than 25, and I'm sure that witness protection is better than widow's benefits." Emma took his hand, feeling the wedding ring they'd exchanged just days before. "We'll get through this together." "Together," Fred agreed. "But Emma, you need to understand what this means. The man you married, the powerful, respected, feared Fred Morrison, That man dies today. Whoever we become in witness protection, I'll just be a regular guy with a complicated past. Emma turned to face him fully. Fred, the man I fell in love with wasn't a crime boss. He was a father learning to communicate with his son. He was someone brave enough to find peaceful solutions instead of violent ones. He was a man who made pancakes shaped like letters and cried during romantic movies. She smiled through her tears. That man will survive anything. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. FBI debriefings where Fred provided detailed information about criminal operations spanning decades, legal proceedings to formalize their cooperation agreement, arrangements for their disappearance from the only life they'd known. Tommy was told they were moving for Fred's business, that they'd be living somewhere new and exciting. The 8-year-old was sad to leave his school and friends, but excited about the adventure. His resilience broke Emma's heart and gave her strength in equal measure. Will I still be Tommy Morrison? He asked as they packed his room. You'll still be our Tommy, Emma assured him. That's all that matters. Their last night in Boston, Emma walked through the mansion one final time. Every room held memories. The kitchen where Fred had made her letter-shaped pancakes, the garden where they'd fallen in love, Tommy's bedroom where she'd become a mother for the first time. Second thoughts? Fred asked, finding her in his study. About leaving? No, Emma said. About the choices that led us here? Never. Fred pulled a small wrapped package from his desk drawer. I wanted to give you this before we go. Emma unwrapped it to find a beautiful locket. Gold, delicate, clearly antique. It was my grandmother's, Fred explained. She gave it to my mother, who was supposed to give it to my wife. But my mother never thought anyone was good enough for her precious son. He smiled sadly. She was right. No one was good enough. Except you. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes as Fred fastened the locket around her neck. Fred, whatever name we have tomorrow, wherever we live, whoever we become, you're still the woman who saved my family. You're still the love of my life. When Fred kissed her, Emma tasted goodbye and hello, ending and beginning, fear and hope all mixed together. The next morning they were driven to a safe house outside the city, where they would live under surveillance until the trials ended. Their new identities were waiting. David and Sarah Chen with 8-year-old Michael. David was a former accountant starting a small business consulting firm. Sarah was a graduate student in education. Michael was a normal little boy who happened to be deaf. We get to keep our sign language? Tommy, now Michael, asked excitedly. Of course, Emma, now Sarah, assured him. That's something no one can ever take away from us. Fred, now David, squeezed her hand. Ready for our new life, Mrs. Chen? Emma looked at her husband, her son, their small but complete family preparing to disappear into ordinary American life. They would live in a small town in Oregon. David would help businesses with their taxes and bookkeeping. Sarah would eventually teach at a school for deaf children. Michael would grow up safe, loved, and bilingual in English and ASL. It wasn't the life Emma had imagined when she first signed to a crying 8-year-old in a Boston restaurant, but it was theirs, bought with courage and sacrifice and protected by love so fierce it had transformed a criminal empire into a family worth saving. I'm ready, Emma said. As their car pulled away from everything they'd known, heading west toward uncertainty and possibility, Tommy, Michael, signed from the back seat. Are we going to be happy in our new home? Emma looked at Fred, David, and saw the same determined optimism in his eyes that she felt in her heart. We're going to be together, she signed back. That's all we need to be happy. Their new life was beginning. 2 years into their new life in Redmond, Oregon, the Chen family had settled into a routine that felt surprisingly normal. David's accounting business was thriving. Sarah had finished her master's degree and was teaching at the Oregon School for the Deaf, and 10-year-old Michael was the star of his elementary school's science fair. You're going to be late, Sarah called to David as he stood in their kitchen, tying his tie and reviewing client files. Just reviewing the Patterson account, David replied, accepting the coffee cup she handed him. Their books are a disaster. It's going to take months to sort out their tax situation. Sarah kissed his cheek, marveling at how domestic they'd become. David's hair was longer now, his face clean-shaven instead of the precisely groomed beard he'd worn in Boston. He looked younger, more relaxed, like the weight of his former life had literally lifted from his shoulders. Michael's teacher wants to meet with us about his college prep track, Sarah said. Apparently he's testing at high school level in mathematics. Takes after his old man, David said proudly. We'll schedule something for next week. It was these moments, Ordinary conversations about ordinary problems that reminded Sarah how far they'd traveled from their former lives. No bodyguards, no coded phone calls, no worrying about federal surveillance, just a normal family dealing with normal challenges. But sometimes, late at night, Sarah would wake to find David staring out their bedroom window with an expression she recognized from Boston, the look of a man calculating threats and escape routes. "Bad dream?" she would ask. "Old habits," David would reply, settling back into bed. "Go back to sleep." Sarah knew the transition wasn't as easy for David as he pretended. He'd given up everything that defined him: power, respect, the ability to protect his family through strength and fear. Now he protected them through anonymity and careful planning, but she could see it cost him. Their peaceful existence shattered on a Tuesday morning in March, when Sarah opened their front door to find a man she didn't recognize standing on their porch. He was tall, well-dressed, with intelligent eyes and a smile that didn't reach past his lips. "Mrs. Chen?" he asked politely. "I'm Detective James Wright from the Redmond Police Department. I'd like to speak with you and your husband about a matter that's come to our attention." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. "What kind of matter?" "The kind that's better discussed privately," Wright replied. "Is Mr. Chen home?" "He's at work," Sarah managed. "But I can call him—" "No need," Wright interrupted. "I'll wait." 20 minutes later, David pulled into their driveway with the controlled urgency Sarah remembered from their Boston life. He'd received her coded text message, their prearranged signal that law enforcement had found them. "Detective Wright," David said, extending his hand as he approached the porch. "How can we help you?" Wright studied David with uncomfortable intensity. "You look familiar, Mr. Chen. Have we met before?" "I don't think so," David replied smoothly. "I'd remember." Wright smiled. "I'm sure you would. See, I used to work organized crime in Boston before transferring out here. Spent a lot of time studying surveillance photos of various persons of interest." He paused. "Amazing how much a haircut and a shave can change a man's appearance." Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Their careful new life, their protected identities, their safety, all of it was crumbling in real time. "Detective Wright," David said carefully, "I think there's been some mistake." "Fred Morrison," Wright interrupted quietly, "also known as David Chen, according to your federal protection paperwork, which means your lovely wife here is Emma Morrison, née Williams, and the deaf kid inside is Tommy Morrison." Sarah's instinct was to run, to grab Michael and disappear, but David's slight hand gesture warned her to stay calm. "What do you want?" David asked. Wright's smile became genuine. "Relax, Morrison. I'm not here to expose you. I'm here to warn you." David's eyes narrowed. "About what?" "Vincent Torino was released from federal prison last week," Wright said. "Reduced sentence for good behavior. Word is he's looking for the man who testified against him." Sarah felt sick to her stomach. Vincent Torino had been one of the family heads Fred's testimony had helped convict, a man known for long memory and violent revenge. "Torino doesn't know where we are," David said. "Our relocation was compromised 6 months ago," Wright interrupted. "Someone in the U.S. Marshal's office has been selling information about protected witnesses. 3 families have been murdered in the past year." The casual way Wright delivered this devastating news made it even more terrifying. Sarah gripped the porch railing to keep from collapsing. "Why are you helping us?" David asked suspiciously. "Because I spent 2 years working the Vincent Torino case before the feds took over. I know what that animal is capable of." Wright's expression darkened. "And because you have a kid. Kids don't deserve to pay for their parents' choices." Sarah thought about Michael inside, probably doing homework at the kitchen table, blissfully unaware that their protected life was ending. "What are you suggesting we do?" David asked. "Disappear again, tonight. Leave everything and run." Wright handed David a business card. "There's a safe house in Montana where you can lay low while we figure out a more permanent solution." David studied the card, his mind clearly racing through options and consequences. "How do we know you're legitimate? How do we know this isn't a trap?" Wright pulled out his badge and ID, then handed David his phone. "Call the Portland field office. Ask for Agent Martinez. Tell her Wright is trying to save the Morrison family. She'll verify everything I've told you." While David made the call, Wright turned to Sarah. "Mrs. Morrison, I need you to understand something. Vincent Torino has killed entire families to make points. If he finds you here, your husband's testimony won't matter. What will matter is sending a message that no one betrays the Torino family and lives." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "We just wanted a normal life." "I know," Wright said kindly. "And maybe someday you'll have one, but not today." David returned the phone, his face grim. "Agent Martinez confirms everything. Torino's out, witnesses are dying, our location is compromised." Wright nodded. "So what's it going to be? Fight a war you can't win or disappear before the enemy finds you?" Sarah looked at their house, modest but comfortable, the first real home they'd built together. She thought about her students at the deaf school, about the life they'd carefully constructed over 2 years. Then she thought about Michael, losing both his parents to a violent man's revenge. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Torino landed in Portland this morning," Wright replied. "His associates have been asking questions in town. You have maybe 6 hours before they connect David Chen to Fred Morrison." David put his arm around Sarah's shoulders. "Same question as Boston," he said quietly. "Are you ready for another new life, Mrs. Chen?" Sarah leaned into her husband's strength and made the only choice that mattered. "Let's go get our son." As they prepared to disappear again, this time forever, Sarah realized that loving Fred Morrison meant accepting that they would always be running. But they would be running together, and that made all the difference. Their second new life was about to begin. The safe house in Montana was a remote cabin surrounded by mountains and silence. For 3 weeks, the Chen family, still using their Oregon identities, lived under the protection of federal agents while lawyers and marshals negotiated their next relocation. "This time will be different," Agent Martinez explained during one of her visits. "New state, new region, deeper cover. Vincent Torino will never find you." But Sarah could see the doubt in David's eyes. He'd spent too many years understanding how information flowed in criminal networks, how patient men like Torino could be, how far their reach extended. "What about Michael's education?" Sarah asked. "His social development? He needs stability, friends, a sense of belonging somewhere." "We'll make sure he has all of that," Martinez assured her. "There's an excellent school for deaf children in Austin. You could even continue teaching." "Austin? Texas?" David raised an eyebrow. "That's a long way from Oregon." "That's the point," Martinez replied. "Distance and documentation. This time, your new identities will be perfect. Birth certificates, school records, employment history, everything will check out completely." Michael, now 10 years old and increasingly aware that their family was different from others, signed a question to Sarah. "Are we in trouble? Are we bad people?" Sarah's heart broke at the confusion in her son's face. "We're not bad people, sweetheart. But Daddy used to have a job that made some bad people angry. We have to stay safe." "Will I ever see my friends from Oregon again?" Michael asked. Sarah glanced at David, seeing the same grief in his expression that she felt. "Probably not, honey, but we'll make new friends in our new home." Michael considered this with the pragmatic acceptance of a child who'd already lived through one major upheaval. "Will you and Daddy still be my parents?" "Forever and always," David signed emphatically. "Nothing will ever change that." That night, after Michael was asleep, Sarah and David sat on the cabin's porch, staring at stars brighter than any they'd seen in cities. "I'm tired of running," Sarah said quietly. David's hand found hers. "I know, but what's the alternative? Go back to Boston and face whatever's left of my old enemies. Let Torino find us and finish what he started." "Fight back," Sarah said. "Stop being victims and become something else." David turned to look at her. "Emma, this isn't a movie. I can't just shoot my way out of this situation. Torino has resources, connections, patience. He'll keep coming until he finds us." "What if he couldn't keep coming?" Sarah asked. "What if someone stopped him permanently?" David's expression hardened. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that Detective Wright was right about one thing. Vincent Torino is an animal that's going to keep hunting innocent families until someone puts him down. Sarah, you're talking about murder, about becoming the kind of people we tried to leave behind." Sarah stood and walked to the porch railing, her mind racing through possibilities she'd never imagined considering. "I'm talking about protection, about making sure our son doesn't spend his childhood running from ghosts." "And how exactly would we accomplish that?" David asked. Sarah turned to face her husband. "You still have contacts in Boston, people who owe you favors, who understand that Torino crossed lines when he started hunting protected witnesses." David was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, what you're describing would end our protection. The moment I make contact with anyone from my old life, we lose federal support. We'd be completely on our own." "We're already on our own," Sarah replied. "The federal protection failed. Our identities were compromised. Our location was discovered. The only people who saved us were a small-town detective and our own quick thinking. David joined her at the railing, his expression thoughtful. Even if I could arrange something, even if Torino was eliminated, there might be others. His associates, other families who see our cooperation as betrayal. One problem at a time, Sarah said. Right now, Vincent Torino is the immediate threat. Deal with him, and we buy ourselves years to figure out permanent solutions. They stood in silence, both understanding the magnitude of what Sarah was proposing. If David reached out to his former associates, they would be choosing violence over law enforcement, revenge over justice. What about our promise to be different? David asked. What about becoming better than who we used to be? Sarah thought about Michael's innocent questions, about the fear in his eyes when strange men appeared at their door, about the life of constant vigilance and relocation that stretched ahead of them. Sometimes being better means making harder choices, she said finally. Sometimes protecting your family requires getting your hands dirty. David studied his wife's face in the starlight, seeing determination and love and a fierce maternal protectiveness that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. If I do this, he said slowly, if I reach out to the old network, there's no going back. We'll never be David and Sarah Chen again. We'll be Fred and Emma Morrison, fugitives from both sides of the law. Then we'll be fugitives together, Sarah replied, but we'll be alive, and our son will be safe. David pulled out his phone, a secure satellite device the marshals had given him for emergencies. For a long moment, he stared at the dark screen, weighing the consequences of the call he was considering. I love you, he said finally. I love you too, Sarah replied. Whatever comes next, we face it as a family. David dialed a number he'd memorized years ago but never thought he'd use again. Marco, he said when the call connected. It's Fred Morrison. I need a favor. As David spoke quietly into the phone, arranging things that couldn't be undone, Sarah realized they were about to cross the final line between their old life and their new one. They would never again be innocent refugees seeking protection. They would be hunters, protecting their family the only way they knew how. The transformation was as terrifying as it was necessary. Mestas, 3 months later, Vincent Torino was found dead in his Boston apartment, apparently the victim of a home invasion. The news reached the Montana safe house through official channels. Agent Martinez delivered the information with a carefully neutral expression that suggested she understood more than she was willing to discuss. The threat to your family has been eliminated, she told David and Sarah during her final visit. Your relocation to Austin can proceed as planned. David and Sarah exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. They both knew Torino's death hadn't been random, just as they both knew that David's old connections had honored their debts one final time. What about investigations? David asked. Will this lead back to us? There's no evidence connecting Vincent Torino's death to any federal witnesses, Martinez replied carefully. Sometimes violent men die violent deaths. That's not the government's concern. 2 weeks later, the Morrison family, now permanently the Williams family, moved to Austin, Texas. Michael enrolled in the Texas School for the Deaf, where his intelligence and signing skills quickly made him popular with teachers and students. Sarah found work as a graduate teaching assistant at the University of Texas while pursuing her doctorate. David opened a small business consulting firm that allowed him to use his financial expertise legitimately. They bought a modest house in a family-friendly neighborhood, complete with a backyard where Michael could practice baseball and a garden where Sarah could grow vegetables. For the first time since leaving Boston, they felt truly settled. No regrets? David asked one evening as they watched Michael play with neighborhood children in their backyard. The sight of their son laughing and running with kids who accepted his deafness as just another interesting trait filled both parents with profound relief. Only that it took us this long to find peace, Sarah replied, leaning into her husband's embrace. 5 years had passed since that first night at Romano's, when a frightened little boy's tears had brought them together. 5 years of danger, transformation, love, and ultimately redemption. They were no longer the waitress and the crime boss who'd fallen in love across impossible boundaries. They were parents, partners, ordinary people who'd fought extraordinary battles for their family's survival. I have something for you, David said, pulling a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. Sarah opened it to find a simple gold charm, a tiny pair of hands forming the sign for I love you. For your locket, David explained, to remember where we started and how far we've traveled. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes, as David fastened the charm next to the antique locket that held their wedding photo. The juxtaposition was perfect, old and new, dangerous past and hopeful future, all held together by the language that had first connected them. "I have something for you too," Sarah said, taking David's hands and placing them on her still flat stomach. "Something that's going to arrive in about 7 months." David's eyes widened in shock and wonder. "Sarah, are you saying—" "I'm saying our family is growing," Sarah confirmed, laughing at the expression of pure joy that transformed her husband's face. "Michael's going to be a big brother." When David kissed her, Sarah tasted their entire future. Children growing up safe and loved, grandchildren who would know nothing of their grandparents' dangerous past, generations of happiness built on the foundation of choices made with courage and love. That evening, they told Michael the news. His reaction was characteristically practical. "Will the baby be deaf like me?" "We don't know yet," Sarah signed. "Would that bother you?" Michael considered this seriously. "No, if the baby is deaf, I can teach them all the best signs. If the baby can hear, I can teach them signs anyway so our whole family can talk together." Sarah felt her heart swell with pride at her son's generous spirit. Michael had inherited the best parts of both his parents, David's intelligence and Sarah's compassion, without the complications of their former lives. As they tucked Michael into bed that night, he signed a question that stopped both parents in their tracks. "Will you tell the new baby about Daddy's old job?" Sarah and David looked at each other, understanding the weight of the question. How much of their history should their children know? How much danger came with family secrets? And how much protection came from innocent ignorance? "When they're old enough to understand," David signed carefully, "we'll tell them that Daddy used to make bad choices, but found better ways to live. We'll tell them that love can change everything, even people who think they're too broken to be saved. And we'll tell them," Sarah added, "that sometimes the most important thing you can do is fight for your family, no matter what it costs." Michael nodded solemnly, accepting this as he'd accepted all the other complex truths of his young life. Later that night, as Sarah and David held each other in their comfortable bedroom in their safe house in their ordinary neighborhood, they reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. "Do you think we're heroes or villains in this story?" Sarah asked. David considered the question seriously. "I think we're parents who learned that protecting your family sometimes requires becoming someone you never thought you could be." Outside their window, Texas stars shone down on a family that had been forged in fire and tempered by love. Tomorrow would bring ordinary challenges, parent-teacher conferences, grocery shopping, helping Michael with his science project. But tonight, they were simply Fred and Emma Morrison, dangerous, devoted, and finally, peacefully home. Their love story had begun with a frightened father who couldn't communicate with his deaf son. It had evolved through violence, transformation, and sacrifice, and it had found its resolution in the most ordinary miracle of all, a family choosing each other again and again, no matter what the world demanded of them. In the end, love had conquered everything,